So anyway, he's an existentialist, which means that he's dealing with issues about existence. He's dealing with issues about meaning and purpose in life. And there are lots of different psychologists and lots of different psychiatrists and ways of approaching it. But again, existentialism particularly is looking at how to come up with meaning and purpose in life. It kind of begins with this idea that a lot of our psychological problems, and I'm not just talking about like neurochemical ones, I'm talking about the problems of like our psyches, the problems of our experiences, the problems of our feelings. They're largely centered on this idea that we don't have a meaning or a purpose in life. Excuse me. So, for example, there's a very, very well-known existential psychologist. I think he's a psychologist. I'm not sure he's a psychiatrist. Viktor Frankl, who wrote a really wonderful book, Man's Search for Meaning. And if you're only going to read one book in the next few years, I really recommend that one. It's accessible. It isn't purely academic. And it's pretty short. It's a relatively short book. And the whole book is about exactly what the title suggests, searching for meaning and how to find it. And again, Frankl spent 3 years in a concentration camp. And when he got out, he was trying to figure out why is it that some people survived and other people didn't survive. And he comes to the conclusion that the people who survived were not the ones that you necessarily would have expected. They weren't the youngest, they weren't the strongest, they weren't the fittest, any of those things. It was the people who found some kind of meaning or purpose in that. And when you're in that concentration camp, it's really hard to find meaning and purpose in that. Why are you suffering? There's really only one word because of it. Just because. Why am I suffering? Because. Why did you do this to us? Because. And there isn't really much more satisfaction beyond that. And even if you could get an answer, an explanation for the suffering, it wouldn't necessarily perhaps alleviate the suffering very much, we would think. But what Frankl said he discovered was that people who did find some kind of way of making meaning or purpose out of it, they managed to get through those situations. And it throws us back to the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, who said that if you have a why, you can survive anyhow. You can find anyhow. In other words, if you have a reason for it, a why, well, now you can get through it. If I tell you, run for the next 10 miles, and you're like, why? Just because. I mean, how far would you get into that run before you quit and you walk or whatever? Not very far at all. But if I tell you, run the next 10 miles, why? Because there's, I don't know, a chest of $3 million over there. And if you can get there in the next, 3 hours, then you can have that chest. Well, you'll find a way to get there. If you're running and you break your leg while you're on the way, you're going to think, $3 million, and you'll get up and you'll find a way to get there. But if I say to you, because in this treasure chest 10 miles away, you're going to discover some really important things about yourself. There's nothing in it except what you kind of project into it. You fired up about running those 10 miles? Probably not. But if you have a why, if you have a strong enough why, you can survive anyhow. So you can think about this where if you have, we all know people who hate the jobs that they go to, but they go to it every day to make less than they probably deserve, in conditions that they don't like, for something that other than the fact that it provides for family is meaningless to them, to provide for people who maybe don't appreciate them as much as we should, and yet they go and they do it day in and day out, day in and day out. Why? Because they have a why. They have a why. So Irvin Yalom is mostly centered on this idea of finding the why. He wants to know the why behind these things. So he says, ask yourself, who are the secure ones, the comfortable, the eternally cheerful? Who are those people who we look at and we're like, man, I'll be more like that person? And I'll tell you the answer. Only those with dull vision, narrow vision, and the common people and the children. So that's a pretty broad range, by the way, the common people and the children. And so he's equating these two as though to have this view of being secure and comfortable and cheerful, that's a very childlike view to have. Is there anyone that we might know who's like this? Maybe know people like this? Yeah, probably. And their entire philosophy is kind of built around this, like a Buddhist. This is, they're kind of not cheerful in the sense of like being super excited, but you have to think about what kind of a perspective leads to something like this. To be secure. Why are children secure? Because they don't know any better. That's all it is. hell it is. You know, what children are comfortable. Why? Well, because they don't know any differently. And whatever circumstances you're raised in, you come to think that those are normal and natural, and that's the way things are supposed to be. But when you see something different, all of a sudden it can kind of wake you up. To be cheerful. That means that you're not going to be aware of the other sufferings of life, what's going on in the rest of the world. You know, how many of you guys have seen The Matrix? Curiosity. So you know the analogy about the red pills and the blue pills. Essentially, the idea is that you're offered these two possibilities. One is that you can be given, the idea is that right now you're kind of asleep. You're given a red pill, which will let you know about the truth of the world, truth of the universe, what's really going on. But then, of course, the upside is that you know what's going on. The downside is that
you know what's going on.
Now you know what's going on. So now you have to live with what's going on, the knowledge of that. Versus the blue pill, which will allow you to just kind of stay ignorant of everything that's going on in the world. So the question becomes, which one would you rather have? The red pill or the blue pill? Now, the truth is that we're given this option every day. It's an analogy, but we're given the option every day. It's just that in this case here, you can take a pill that happens automatically versus having to investigate things, look into what's going on. And then, of course, the blue pill means you just don't look into things, you just kind of exist in life. And the things, I know a lot of people who are on both sides of these things. I know a lot of people who intentionally avoid reading about what's going on in the world because they just don't want to know. And it isn't kind of like, it isn't just like putting on blinders and going like, la, 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 like a child. They just say, there's so many bad things going on, it can't help but ruin your mood. And so she's like, I can't do anything about it, so why don't I, why bother knowing about it if I can't do anything about it? It's better to not know and just kind of go on with life. Then there'll be some people who will say, no, I want to know what's going on. I don't recall who it was, but someone said it's better to be a miserable Socrates than a satisfied pig. In other words, it's better to know what's going on than to not what's going on. Any of you guys ever look at your dog or your cat and you're like, you're so lucky. You don't have to worry about what's going on in life. But then again, the dog also has to eat the same food every single day. The dog only ever gets water. You ever think about it? I mean, I have two cats and I wonder sometimes, like, how do they, like before they moved in, I guess you could say, before they came to live with me, they were living outdoors. And I think sometimes, like, my goodness, like you had the whole world available to you, and now you live within these four walls. Don't you go crazy with it? And the truth is that they don't really go crazy with it. If I open up the door, my cats don't even go outside. They just stand there and they look outside. They just know that that's not where they want to go. Everything that they want, or everything that they think that they have available to them is inside. Other cats walk up to the screen. Sometimes I'll get home and there's like a kitty convention where my two cats are at the screen, like other cats from the area are all hanging out on my porch. Little kitty convention. So my cats are very aware that there are other cats out there. There's one cat particularly, my neighbor, who, her name is Sisu, and my cat always wants to play with her. So I open the door, and he won't go outside and play with her. He tries to get her to come inside to play with him. And she comes in once in a while, but he never goes outside to play with her. He loves leaves. My cat, for some reason, loves leaves. And if there's a leaf on my porch, he starts to chirp and gets all excited, so I'll open the screen. He'll go, if I don't get the leaf for him, he'll go outside with one little paw, get the leaf, and then come back in. I don't know if he's aware there's a whole world out there. He knows that there are cats out there, but I wonder if he did know what was going on. So the idea is that they're so lucky, they're content with what they have. And by the way, the truth is that we could all be content with what we have. We really could be. It takes some effort, but we could do that. But those are the decisions that we make every day, which one to be. So anyway, when Yalom is saying that it's impossible to be these things, it's impossible to be aware of it. It isn't just because we become aware of the problems out in the world. It's because we become aware of the problems that are inside of us. That's what it really is. The idea that we're secure, comfortable, eternally cheerful. If the existentialist is concerned about the meaning of existence, what's the opposite of existence?
Nothing.
Nothingness. Nothingness. And that's the thing that terrifies so many people. The idea of, well, death. What happens when you die? Think about it like on Friday, for example. We had the lockdown on Friday. What was everyone so concerned about? Death. That's what it really is. It comes down to that. And if you're somebody who's not concerned about that, well then think about what's being said here. You just haven't thought about it. That's all it really is. People will say things like, well, I'm not worried about that. I'll worry about it when I get there. Blah, blah, blah. That's this. Versus someone who really wrestles with the issue. And the reason that you want to wrestle with the issue is because once you wrestle with it, well, then you can deal with it. You can handle it. It becomes one less thing in life that can control you. It's one less thing that terrifies you as you're going off to sleep at night, in the middle, in the dark, in the middle of the night. It's one less thing to worry about. But it takes, of course, some work to do. And then along those lines, when you do that, you start to discover something else about yourself, and then something else about yourself, and then something else about yourself, and then you become stronger through that process. But the process of closing off your eyes to the world around you, the process of closing off your eyes to what's inside of yourself, that doesn't make you stronger. It's exactly this process right here. And it's exactly the thing that makes you weak. It's exactly the thing that makes you weak. The way that you become stronger is to wrestle with things. You lift weights, you get physically stronger. You lift heavy ideas, your mind gets stronger. And if you lift these things that scare you and terrify you, and you really engage them, especially if you engage them on their own terms, then it's an interesting thing, because if you lose that battle, it's not going to kill you. Hopefully it makes you stronger. Hopefully it makes you less terrified. But hopefully it also gives you the ability to grapple with some things in life so that you don't have to be worried about them. And you're going to find some really powerful ideas at the bottom of that. Like right now, if there's something in your life that you really want to try, you really want to do it, think about the things that are holding you back from it. Fear of embarrassment. Okay, what's the worst thing that can happen to you in life? You can die. Guess what? It's going to happen. No matter what you do in life, you're going to die. There's no way around that. It's the ultimate statistic. You can look it up. 10 out of 10 people die. I'm not making that up. And yet, somehow, every day, you manage to pry yourself out of bed, take a shower, hopefully, and show up to life and do the things of life. Wow. Why bother? Why bother? And that's because somehow, some way, you found something to get you up in the morning. And even if it's, think about that. You wake up in the morning, your first thought can be, I'm going to die. Well, I'm going to go to school today. That even in that, there's something that's gotten you out of bed in the morning to come to school, to help you to overcome that terror of death. And so you manage every day to wake up and overcome the fear of death. And even if you might say, well, that's just because I don't think about it too much. Oh, but once in a while you do. And some people think about it constantly, and yet they still manage to get up every day and put their life together, at least move their life forward. So given the fact that you're going to die and that you're aware of it, and given the fact that that's the worst thing that can possibly happen to you in life, I guess the next question is, what are you worried about? What are you afraid of? If there's something that you want to go for in life, like if you want to, open up a business, well, why not do it? Because what if I fail? What if you fail? Well, what if I go bankrupt? Ooh, you have no money. You know you're going to die, right? Okay. What if I go for this? Well, what if I get embarrassed? Oh, embarrassment. You know you're going to die, right? And when you die, you're probably going to crap yourself. That's something that happens when people die. If you didn't know that, now you do. So, what else are you embarrassed about? And the idea is that you can find a way to overcome that one terror, which is the ultimate existential terror. And yet, so often in life, we can't find ways to overcome the other things that are much smaller, that are completely insignificant in comparison to that. And what it really is a lot of times is that we look at the immediate. We're thinking like, yeah, I'm going to die, but that's way down the road. First off, is it way down the road? I don't know. I always keep that painting on my wall. I mentioned it before. It's one of my students, Aaron. He died in September of a school year. Just a few months in, 2 months into a school year, he died. I don't think that he thought he was going to die that year. He was only 17 years old. Yeah. I remember the last thing I said to him was, Aaron, you look like shit. You should go, he said, I feel like shit. I said, you should get that checked, man. He said, I think I'm going to go get that checked. But damn it, he went home and took a nap first. He was going to the doctor after his nap. But he took a nap first, and he never got up from that nap, unfortunately. I don't think he looked at that and said, today is a good day to die. But he did, so I don't know how far in the future that is. None of us do. Our birth certificates do not have expiration dates on them. So maybe it's in the future. The only reason, what we really mean when we say it's in the future, what we mean is it's not something I think about much. I don't grapple with it. Why? Because thinking about it is too terrible. It's too frightening. That's all. Well, if you're afraid of it, it's holding you back in certain ways. It's stopping you from being what you could become. If you can deal with that existential terror, that fear of death, and again, maybe you can't deal with it completely, but what you can start to do is understand some things about it. Like, for example, one of the things that terrifies people is, I'm going to die, and I haven't really done anything. My life doesn't matter. It's small, it's meaningless. Who even knows I exist? Well, you can fix that. You can do something meaningful with your life. It doesn't have to be meaningful for the whole world, but damn, it can be meaningful for you. It can give you purpose. It can give you drive. And then once you kind of realize that you have some singular purpose in life, and then you realize there's a big question mark for when this sleep is going to come. Well, I mean, now there's almost not time for almost anything else. Like whatever it is that you have your heart set on, your mind set on that you want to do in your life, there's not time for anything else because you're up against a clock. You know? And that's a good thing, by the way. That's a good thing, by the way. I mean, they say there's this terrible saying, I hate it. They say that youth is wasted on the young. That youth is wasted on the young. I think that wisdom is also wasted on the old. I think it goes both ways. I think that youth and wisdom are wasted on certain people, regardless of their ages. But if you can start to find something early on in your life, when you have the energy and the passion to pursue it, I mean, there's almost nothing that's outside of your reaches. And I really genuinely mean that. Like, it isn't like some like sit in circles and hold hands and say, you're all wonderful and spectacular, just the way. No, you're not. You're a bunch of messes, and you're in horrible shapes mentally, and several of you physically. You're not what you could be. And you know this. You don't need me to come along and tell you this. You probably hear this all the time, and worse yet, you feel this about yourself. And so hopefully you wake up from that slumber, and put yourself together, not to make anybody happy, not to give in, not to whatever it is that's holding us to make it for other people, but to do it for ourselves. And if not for yourself, again, I mean, several of you I know want to have families in your life, and so maybe you start doing these things now to put your children and your spouse, your future spouse, in the best possible situations, so that you don't have to apologize for not doing enough, or being enough, or having enough, or not being a role model, or any of these kinds of things. And so the younger that you are, that you can sort these things out, discover that passion, and put yourself together in a way that allows you to move confidently through life. I think I was talking about it in this class, the idea of the eternal recurrence. German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, he talks about how it is that you can kind of judge your life. And it kind of works like this. Imagine if your life were to end today, and a demon were to come to you and say, well, you're dead. And then you go, wow, but I'm still conscious. Well, yes, because this is what your eternity looks like. We're going to replay the movie of your life. Not the highlights, not the lowlights, but from beginning to end. You've got all of eternity, so you've got time for this. So we're going to play your whole life. You're going to get to watch yourself like in third person. And that's your eternity. Constantly, over and over and over and over again, watching your life. Everything that you did, everything that you thought, how everyone reacted to you. I wonder how many of you are sitting there going like, oh yeah, that is a demon. For sure, that's a real demon from hell who's going to force me to look at my life and see how I've acted and behaved and responded and thought and made people feel. So the goal is that if you can hear that and engage in that thought experiment and say, that actually sounds really exciting. To be able to look at my life and celebrate it over and over and over again. Not that you were necessarily the victorious one, but did you live in a way that you could look at and say, I was proud to have lived that way. And it's a way, I guess, of thinking about every decision that we make. Is this a decision that I would want to watch myself eternally recurring throughout all of eternity, having made this decision, having done this thing? You don't have to be successful because, again, like, whatever, you make $1 trillion, but when you're sitting there watching this thing on repeat, the question, it's not just going to be, you made the $1 trillion, wonderful, that will be a highlight probably. But then I guess after that it's going to be, how did you make it? And I wonder if you could go through it without having a horribly guilty conscience if you did it in despicable ways. And what did you do with it once you had it? And again, these aren't judgmental things of saying, you should do this, you should do that. What the hell do I know about what you should do? I'm just some guy at the front of a classroom. But you know what you should be doing with those kinds of things. And if you could look at your life in retrospect and see how you made people feel and how you made yourself feel, how you did these things, if you could look at that eternally recurring, if you could say to that demon, at the end of watching your life movie, say, this was my life? Again, play it again. I want to see it again. Play it again. Then you've lived a meaningful, purposeful, significant life. Not by anybody else's standards, but by your own standard. Maybe that's the thing to aspire to be someone that we can be proud of, ourselves, inside, outside, and if you wish to have a family someday, maybe your children will be able to look at you and be proud of that as well. Maybe that's the meaning of life. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticism?